we've been here since 2007. There's about 110 DSPs in Colorado, if not a little bit more. Not all of them are operating. In the whole of the US, there's just on about 3,000 DSPs. And probably 90% are smaller than us, 10% are bigger than us. So it gives you a bit of a sense of size. And again, I don't mind saying this, but you know, we sell $1 million worth of bottles a year, mainly FOB from distributors out. So in 2007, we created this. I didn't create it, I was nothing to do with it. It was a gin company. And we had Ted Palmer, who was a gin freak. He just gin. I came along, my wife's from Erie, Pennsylvania, moved to Florida. That's where my mother-in-law is now. And then she moved to Scotland with me. We had 2 boys, 1 and 3. We decided pack our bags, move to America, because it's easy when you're married to an American. As long as it's 2 years, you get put through the ringer if you're married less than 2 years, because they make an assumption you want a green card. So we've been married 2 years. Came across, brought my 2 boys across, who were Scottish boys, but now are proper little high-five, awesome American boys that do all American stuff. Still, but I wanted to make the very best American single malt whiskey I could. So I brought a Forsyth's Copper Pot still, which you're going to see, which was integral to the making of our single malt whiskey. And there's a great Scottish expression, I don't want to teach you to suck eggs, which means I don't want to tell you something you already know, but I'll say anyway. The biggest difference, because it really gives a handle on what single malt whiskey is, the biggest difference in American single malt whiskey, which actually is not a recognised category at the moment, it comes under the auspices of malt whiskey, which only has to be 51% malted barley. But honestly, I don't know a single distillery that calls themselves single malt whiskey that isn't putting 100% malted barley in. But the biggest difference is that it goes into new oak, charred oak barrels, whereas the rest of the world use second fill barrels. So great cooperage down in Kentucky called Kilton Cooperage. They literally have got 10 docks and they are putting brand new barrels out to the Kentucky industry, and then those same trucks bring back second fill barrels that have been emptied. They put shipping containers and they go to Scotland. So all Scotland gets all of those, and so do the single malt whiskey distilleries through the world. Japan, Tasmania, Australia, Sweden, everywhere. So that's the biggest difference, and so therefore we are not even close to Scotch. We are an American single malt whiskey. Now, if we put it in new oak barrels, then we're moving towards that. But here's the thing, again, climate, shape, style, and use of the still, and water makes colossal differences. So Balcones down in Waco, I know they've got the same supplier of malted barley yeast, same style of still, but their climate tends to give a more spicy whiskey than.
Yeah, we did a barrel pick. It was hot. It was like big.
Isn't that hot?
It was hot. It took us a long time to stop. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, we still have some.
We still work through. It has our Florida sticker on it and everything, but it was a tough sell for the public because it was just too much. It was intense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I think I used Balcones because I know who supplies them with all our raw materials. They're a great company. Just bought by Diageo, bought them recently.
Oh, wow.
We suddenly bought them like that. Diageo own West Word, an Oregon single malt whiskey distillery, or they're a partnership, and then they just about 6 months ago bought Balcones. Yeah. But they were one of the first in America to do it. Yeah. But it shows you where the difference is in that climate and the water. They're not doing anything different. It's a high quality whiskey. And what I felt was also that I wanted, and like Balcones, I bring all my malted barley in from Scotland, north of England. Scotland can't even make enough of their own. And in Scotland, Scotland's the size of Colorado, and they export 1.5 billion bottles. So I bring it in because it's a distiller's mash. It's not a beer mash. And most of the distilleries in America are using a beer mash. Nothing wrong with it. It gives a completely different whiskey. Terrible yield. Proteins are very different. It tastes like a beer. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just didn't, and it's inconsistent because if you get it from their malt from Wyoming versus here versus there.
So what's the difference between the distiller's malt and the...
So Scotland has only signed off on about 5 varieties. That's it, because they know those varieties are going to give consistency, yield, because of the proteins and the sugars, and it's not going to give any laboured flavours that some malted barley malting houses could, depending on what strain and variety malted barley is. So we bring it in. There's only about 4 main suppliers of malted barley in the UK: Chris, Munton, Simpsons, and Bears, I think it is. And they do it, and it gives you a base level so that you can allow all the other constituents to give you a localised flavour, water, still, climate type of thing. I've actually got, I mean, we'll drink some whiskey, but we're doing a brand for a local malting house that gives us all their spare malt for nothing. We then borrow it for nothing, and then they just come up with a bottled and bond called Root Shoot single malt whiskey. Made, that's their malted barley, and we've got partnerships. 150 of their barrels. I mean, they're building stock up here and then launching their own brand. And they did that. They wanted to do bottled bond, so they waited 4 years. And because what we found with their malt was, we thought it was going to be terrible. After 3 years, we were like, this is not going to get good. And then year 4, suddenly, oh my God, it's completely flipped. It wasn't linear that you would expect. It was like that, and then it went, ooh. And so it needs to be ready for that. So we do. So I moved across. Started doing single malt whiskey with Ted as my partner. Ted's get out was single malt whiskey was there. He retired. So I'm the 100% owner now.
What year was that?
So our oldest single malt whiskey is 7 years. So we launched it 4 years ago. So the youngest one we would ever put out was 3 years. 2 years was just not enough. 3 years was good. So yeah, 4 years he retired.
Yeah, so like it started in 07 and you took over in...
Oh, I took it over, well, hold on. I took it over officially 100% only 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Before that, I was a small shareholder building up my stock of whiskey to then launch it, and it hit his time to retire. So we do 2 whiskies here. We do bourbons and we do single malts. We talked about the single malts and we'll touch upon them as we go through. But I wanted to make our bourbon really very different. And I'll be honest, I came across here thinking I could change all Americans from bourbon to single malt, and realised incredibly fast that I'm complete naivety. So we started making a bourbon. And honestly, our bourbons are 50. We promote our single malt, but our bourbons and single malts are evens. And honestly, it was the best thing we ever did. Our last bourbon, our 6-year-old cask strength bourbon, got Fred Minnick's top 10 whiskies last year, our cask strength. But the biggest difference in our bourbon, other than all the reasons I've given you, climate, blah, 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 is that we got 44% malted barley. So it is incredibly high malt. And the reason we did that, in fact, what we'll do right now then, is we may as well try it while we're here before we go through it. That sounds like fun. It's 44 malted barley, 5% rye, and a 51 corn.
Yeah, it's usually the other way around.
And my branding story, because honestly it was easier for production, because malted barley is incredibly acidic. Adding hot water to malted barley is very easy. That's how you extract. If you just add hot water, corns and rye, they glutenize. You've got to boil them, and you've got to put a shitload of enzymes in to break those walls down. We'll go straight into the board actually. And the reason I wanted to do this was because I wanted to be different, but also I asked a lot of master distillers throughout the US, and I still ask them, why don't you use malted barley as a flavouring? Maybe 5%, 10% maximum to your bourbons. And they give me the same answer Scottish distilleries give me when I ask them anything. That's not how we do it. And that's not really an answer. What that is and I can understand why they would say that, because they've got a formula, that works, they're making money out of it. So why change something that works? So this bourbon is a bottled in bond, so it's a little bit older. As in 4 years. This is probably averaging about 5. And oh, so I thought you were just in there.
How many? That's what, third age?
This is Graham. He's another Scots guy who does the distillery next door.
How's it going?
But he borrows my forklift.
I've already broken. He's going to borrow my toilet if you need it. It's nothing fancy over there.
Thanks, and I will leave that.
Really? Or
I'll leave it at
I live
the.
in your office.
Okay, leave it in the office. Thanks, Graham. But my sort of branding comment on this is, I wanted to cut that heated sweet down and that Kentucky burn and add a little bit of another dimension. And I think, hopefully, I've achieved that. Just put that, because I'll be pouring more. So put that there for dumping. So that's a 50 ABV, about 5 years. It's a little step up over our 42 ABV. It's a straight whiskey that's probably averaging about 3 to 4 years. I did a whiskey tasting, American whiskey tasting for Inverurie Whiskey Club yesterday for 2 hours. They're up in Aberdeen in Scotland, and they were blown away by, yes, the whiskey, but they were blown away by just starting to understand what American whiskey is, because most Europeans don't have a clue what American whiskey is. All they know is Jack Daniels and Coke.
Yeah,
That's all they know.
You're right, because that's all they had there.
That's all they had. And if they've got, I was in a store in London, and their best-selling American whiskey is Blanton's, but it's to Americans, because American tourists come along. They go, we can't get that, so it's not British people buying Blanton's, it's Americans buying Blanton's.
This is something else. Like, it's actually really good. Like, it has like bacon spices on the nose, and you taste that when it gets to the gin powder, then it finishes off like soft and long. Like, there's a warmth in the burn, so it's really like questions. Really like structured and polished, and really integrated.
Thank you. I really struggle with bourbons that are 80% corn. It just burns me, and I'm not used to that.
It's funny when you talk about doing that higher malt. Obviously, you're a higher malt. You're a malt guy. Like,
Yeah.
I was surprised you had the 5% rye.
It was a bit. Should we not? Interesting with rye, I found, and maybe other people have experienced, is that 5 rye actually is disproportionately spicy to the number. So if you do 5%, you double the rye. It doesn't double that sort of earthy and spiciness. It's sort of just it's non-linear.
Yeah.
But it was really an experiment because we didn't know how it was going to turn out. Even after I did this, some of the stores were telling me, yeah, it's turned out really well, but I don't think it was going to work after 5-6 years in the barrel. Fuck off. You know, and we proved that now.
Yeah.
So that's the bourbon, and I think for me, I love my bourbon because it's mine, but also it's not that high corn and it plays well. So, as a complete and utter contrast, I'll give you now our Bottom Bond single malt whiskey. So the processes, and again we'll go through and have a look at the process. The processes are identical in every single way. The only difference between what you've just had and this is that a mash bill of this is 100% malted barley. Yeah, thanks for using your glasses because until I give you the peep, then you'll have to. Oh, yeah. You'll have to set the glasses on fire. No, I'm kidding. So you all guys go back tonight?
Yeah. Our flight's
Yeah. So this whenever I do tastings, I really want people to taste these side by side, so they really get that emphasis on what the difference in that mash bill is. It's not a difference in process, it's a different, and most bourbons is a different process than single malts, because that extraction, either adding hot water or boiling.
I get corn for your bourbon. Do you use the hot still or do you use the
Flaked. So we use flake corn, local flake corn. You know, there's huge debates about, is the corn sweet, or is it the corn that highlights the sugars out of the barrel? So what you're tasting in a heavy corn bourbon is not necessarily the corn being sweet, it could be that it's amplifying those sugars coming out of the barrel. I still think corn is sweet.
Yeah.
It is.
But I think it does amplify the sugars.
Man, this is good.
I'm a Scotch guy, so
Good, and I like that because I think you then, if you're Scotch, you can appreciate the difference with this because it leans towards, as an American Scotch drinker, it leans towards the flavours you're used to if you're a bourbon drinker. It's that new oak barrel.
Yeah.
And then our bourbon leans towards the flavours that a Scotch whisky drinker, they're getting closer, but they'll never touch. Because of that maltiness in the barrel.
and I find it see that. I mean, the bourbon's balanced. This is the better balance.
Yeah, this has the sweetness that the American palate has, you know. And again, when we all have different palates, but what we really care about is how are we going to sell it, and how much can we sell it, you know, in a sense, and are people going to like it, right? Because the last thing we want to do is invest a lot of money in a brand and then it's just sitting, right? Like Balcones, in the sense that we did, and we got our money out, but it was an experience, you know.
Sure.
But yeah, this is something I feel like we'll be able to introduce if we do come across something where we can introduce them to a single malt. We have a huge Scotch recipe tasting.
And if you're able to taste people, especially Scots, you know, I was speaking to the Inverurie guys last night, and one of the things that came up is the Scots 10 years ago accepted that there was people in the world who were making great Scotches. Whether it be, you know, Sullivan's Cove in Tasmania, or Sweden, or New Zealand, or or Japan, they accepted that. And you've got very few Scots that will go single malts the best in the world, fuck everything else. And now even Kentucky Bourbon, we just launched, I don't know if you've heard of the company Lost Lantern. So Lost Lantern, yeah, you've got so many different irons in the fire, this might be another idea. So Lost Lantern goes around America, and there's another guy that's doing this, a guy called Tim Bradstreet from Winter Park in, yes, you know Tim.
Yeah, I was talking about his
doing
new project.
Right. He's not quite doing what Lost Lantern's doing, but he's going around, he bought 12 barrels from me. And he then talks about it, brands it in his location. But what Lost Lantern does is they go around, Adam used to work for the Whiskey Advocate, they go around, buy barrels, they then bottle themselves under their, just got their DSP, they then sell it online. You can only buy it online, and the average bottle price is $120, all cast strength, but what they do is they brand it in their colours, but then they've got Boulder spirits written on it.
Yeah.
And they launched one of our barrels, and they've now built that customer base up over 3 years, and they sold out ours in 65 minutes. So they only launch, they keep it exclusive 20, it's a bit like the Scottish Whisky, the Scottish Malt Society.
Kind of like what Translation's doing too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they only launch about 30 barrels a year, but they killing on it under their own brand.
Yeah, and they have their own fan base, you know. And again, I think we're just doing it more to get access to other people's bourbon there, because we're opening a liquor store over there, right? Like you're saying, Blanton's, whatever. We can't get it in Florida, so we're like, hey, we're gonna open a liquor store there, and then we'll open a little DSP in a sense, so we can play with barrels and whatnot. But yeah, we have enough relations to where. We just want people to come in, hammer some stuff out, and then it'll be just like you said, hey, this is their stuff. We're just kind of showcasing it. Yeah, we're not trying to make something better. I feel like you got to leave that up to the professionals, people that do it for a living. So.
So that's the single malt. So that shows you that massive difference between.
So I have a quick question.
Please.
So me and Benny, we say that this is actually really like crush, but it's like more of like a Saturday morning type of breakfast. Like I was like, it tastes like apple jacks. Like it has this creaminess about it. It's like very crunchy. But I see that it's like almost halfway through its cycle. Is it because it oxidated a little bit more in the bottle? That's why it's like softer and easier. Or is it just like that straight out of the bottle? Because you know, with a little bit of time, things get better because I like a lot of cash strength and high bourbon. So you just add a little bit of time as the air starts to flow, it starts to come more.
So what happens with you brought up an interesting point. So there's huge discussion about, and as I said, I had a chemical engineer in the other day, and he'd never heard of this. But if you proof down, if you bring it out of a barrel and proof down instantly, put it in the bottles, it's a different whiskey than if you take it out, let it breathe, add a bit, add a bit, add a bit, then bottle it. It's a different whiskey. Over maybe a period of 2 to 3 weeks. So we've got rules as how long we take to proof it down. And the best expression somebody said to me is it scarifies. And it almost burns the whiskey when you add water to it. Because if you look at like a Nutrigrain spirit and add water, they're all floating, different densities, all floating, all of that. You stir it, there's still little pockets floating around. So to mix it really, really well is going to improve the whiskey. So we tend to bring it out, sit it in one of our big stainless steels, let it breathe for maybe a week before we add maybe 10% of water to it, i.e. 10% when we're proofing down, so it could be a gallon that we're adding to it. And we just do it slowly. Because the other problem,
What's that called again?
I think it's word scarifying.
Okay, because I remember there was another term. There's a guy
Maybe.
from Old Elk. He does that slow process.
Yeah. It's really, really important you do that. Yeah, and we found 3 weeks is probably, when you read about it, other distillers say 3 weeks, it's probably a little less than that, but we just do it nice and slowly. And even cash strength, pouring it out, you don't put it in the bottle straight away. The other thing is, in the barrel itself, Americans are not obsessed by age. Scottish people are obsessed by age. So they chill filter it, well, that's a different thing, but they caramel colour it. They've got this perception, the lighter it is, the younger it is. So they put a shitload of caramel colouring in. In America, it's illegal to put caramel colouring in. But it's illegal because nobody does it. Because why would you do it? Because you're getting that deep colour from the char in the barrel. So there's no, Americans don't think that way. So Stranahan's down the road, they use number 2, they use number 3, and number 2, theirs is lighter, but who cares? Same aging. The one other thing that we do is, and this will cut the tour shorter because I'm explaining quite a few of the things. One of the things we do, which I think is really, really important, we don't chill filter. And I've had more complaints from our European distributor. We should bloody know that because all the Scotch whiskies chill filter. Than here, and if I put my whiskey in the trunk of my car, you don't have this problem for it. The trunk of my car, and it goes to minus 20 degrees. How many winters have you been here for? It's just unbelievable. You walk outside, beautiful day, and then it's minus 25, and your ears are starting to freeze. You go, what's going on? I'm beginning to freeze, but you don't notice it because it's so dry. So we don't chill filter. And what happens with chill filter? So I go and put it in my car, I've had it overnight, and it's clouded up, and there's little the solids have come out of solution. Americans don't really care about it, right? As much. But interestingly, I was corrected that in Brewery Whiskey Club, they said that's why they started chill filtering in Scotland, because the Americans were complaining. I find the Europeans complain more than Americans. So we don't chill filter because there's flavours and tastes that are getting discarded from chill filter.
Can I, so once it becomes solid, can you shake it up and then?
You can get the big snot stuff out,
Yeah.
but it could stay opaque forever, and that's the problem.
Okay, so because we've come across whiskey like that, right? And we'll get it chipped and we'll seen it. So we try to shake it out and just kind of.
The big globules will come out, and sometimes it's there forever. So whenever I get a complaint, I've got a really nice cut and paste explanation for it that really basically says your whiskey's better because it's not chill filtered.
Strain it. Basically, is that what you're saying?
Even that, it's a whole art when you chill filter it. A lot of them, we play at it a bit. We've got fermenters like glycol jackets around them, so we crash the temperature. Then we could skip them off, but it's a whole science to the chill filter. Well, I'll give you one more, and then we will walk through this thing. So, bourbon single malt. This is a single malt, but it's port cask finished. So what we've done is we've taken our fully matured single malt. We've then purchased a hopefully recently emptied, wet barrel of, this is tawny port. Wet barrel. We've sat it in for about 8 months.
You taste it monthly or weekly?
Well, probably we don't even look at it for about 6 months. And the way I sort of see it is that very, very quickly all that expression of the sherry, the port, is out. But what happens is by keeping it longer, you start getting influenced by French oak. So sherry port uses French oak, which are not charred barrels. The wine barrels tend to be just toasted, and you're then going to pull out some really deep flavours that are a little bit spicier, dark fruits, but you're getting that you're getting that French oak flavour. Huge challenge getting the barrels because the Scots keep everything. They own all the companies, so they get all the first choice. We get all the remnants. So
now Angel's Envy and like all these other guys with their popularity, right? So you're fighting
I mean, we use Tayside, Speyside Cooperage. There's got 2 Coopers in Scotland, 2 in the US.
It was my first choice, now it's wine. It's all about
And yet you are fighting with them, and that's the problem. And a sherry barrel will cost you $1,000. Port barrel will cost you maybe $500.
Are you buying the larger barrels, or are you buying specific?
So 53 gallons. So 50. We did start with the 15 gallon. Actually, to your point, talk about oxidization. I think we found, so in theory, a 15 gallon barrel has got double the wood coverage. Therefore, in theory, you should be able to bring a whiskey out in half the time. The reality is completely different. We found that if you leave whiskey in a barrel less than 2 years, it doesn't come out good. There is a certain, and what I've been told, mostly it's the oxidization within the barrel needs at least 2 years in the big barrel, not 1 year in a small barrel. Don't ask me why, but that's, and we found
It's too complex, so the molecule can't
I mean, like mathematically it works, but like, I mean,
mathematically.
yeah.